Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World episode 172. I'm your host John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Luke Barwickowski, who is the CEO at Pixels. I previously spoke to Luke earlier in the year, in January, and back then Pixels was the most popular blockchain game, but now it is by far the most popular blockchain game, at least in terms of on-chain activity, over 1 million daily active unique wallets. So I talked to Luke particularly about why Pixels is growing so fast when no other blockchain games are growing anything like as fast as that. We also get into some of the weeds of Chapter 2 of Pixels, which is going live next week. So that's actually quite a big update to the game. Really, he calls it a version 2 of the game. And there are some of the changes there are to do with sort of tools and resources and how you sort of take level up tools and get more resources. There's also some interesting stuff going on with the single player mode, which is now becoming a bit more in depth. And that also then feeds into a big update for the power of guilds in the game. So those are guilds such as YGG, external guilds, but also we're seeing an increase in what we call pixel native guilds. So these are groups of players within Pixels who set up these sort of groups, these guilds, and guilds are becoming increasingly important in the game in terms of particularly how rewards are sort of created. So as ever, Luke is extremely smart and lots of good stuff to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Every week we're putting out new episodes, so don't miss out, and see you next time. Hello, and I'm very pleased that I have Luke from Pixels on the podcast again. How's it going, Luke?
Yeah, going really well. Thanks for having me.
Good. So it's going to be a slightly short one as you're a very busy man today, but we're going to sort of take you as we've got you. So no background. You can look up what Luke was doing in Blockchain Gaming World episode 154 in terms of his sort of backstory. And interestingly enough, so that was the end of January. We had that podcast, and you were then already the number one blockchain game in terms of on-chain activity. Obviously, other metrics are available, but you were about 200,000. So you were sort of double everything else. We've moved on a few months now, and now you're basically about 900,000 to 1 million, sort of up and down on that. So 5 times growth in a few months. So nice. But I just wonder, how have you found that? Because when you're double the sort of the next blockchain game in terms of that sort of daily activity, that's one thing. But when you're like 5 times, when you're more than everything else combined, I guess you have not necessarily a target, but to some people that's a target on you. But equally, you are sort of now seen as sort of the blockchain game that is doing really well in a way that Axie was back in the day. So that sort of pressure doesn't seem to have bothered you very much. But I mean, how have you found it in the last few months?
Yeah, I mean, the more scale that you get, the more attention that you're going to get, the more bad actors you're going to bring into an ecosystem. I mean, yeah, we took security super seriously after the release of our token. I think we moved hundreds of millions of dollars through our software in the first couple of days. It was kind of crazy. So we knew that was like the biggest, most important priority. And I mean, people tried to take advantage of that. People tried to hack us, but overall, really smooth launch. So we're really, really thankful for that because the team put a ton of time, energy, and effort before the token was out to make sure that we were safe, secure, and solid on that end. And then, as we've scaled, there's also other issues that start to come up as well. Servers, infrastructure, the normal stuff like that. Our dev team is amazing, so they've done a really good job of scaling all of that. It is not an easy thing to do, to scale a multiplayer game to 1 million DAU, especially when it's real time, all these concurrent users. So props to that team for that. And then, when it comes to like org building, that's a lot of what we've been thinking too. Like now we're in a really amazing spot where we have a lead, I guess, if you want to call it that, in terms of like Web3 gaming users. And what we want to start to do is think about how we set the organization up for the next 2 to 5 years. So what we want to be known for is not being a Web3 gaming company. In the next 5 years, we want to be in the conversations of all gaming companies, and we want to be like top 5 gaming companies. So setting the organization up for that is kind of the struggle right now, and trying to think about how we want to build moving forward. What are the things that we should focus on? What kind of talent do we need? And how do we continue the things that have been working really well for us too? One concrete example is, when we first started getting more attention and scaling up, I thought we needed to professionalize the organization a little bit more, and I still think we do need to some extent. But also, I think what we're going to start doing too is doubling down on the things that people really love and enjoy about us as well, which is things like shipping really fast, giving new updates to the players, keeping them involved in the process. So trying to figure out how to do that at scale with the attention is kind of the fun and tricky part, but that's kind of the next focus basically.
And we should point out, I mean, I think last time we spoke to you about, I don't know, 15 or so people. I mean, I guess you haven't grown. You've grown a bit, but probably not much. What are you at the moment, give or take?
No, not significantly. We're being really careful with who we bring on. What's great is, in 2021, when I was trying to hire talent inside of Web3 gaming, it was very difficult. I could get very few people from the industry before to sign on. And it was a really, really big sell. It's kind of turned for us now, where I think some people are waking up to what Web3 gaming can be. And we're actually getting a lot of really good inbound interest. So as we're building out the next pieces of talent, the big thing I'm looking for is, one, do they want to work hard and be part of something new and big? Because bringing in corporate talent isn't always the best fit there. We need people who are willing to be hungry, who really want to do some change. We also do need that professional experience that we haven't had on this team before too. This is a young, scrappy team that was just figuring out how to make things work here, and now we kind of want to combine both of those things essentially.
Cool. Yeah, and I notice without going too far down this sort of rabbit hole, you're very active on Twitter. I think your Twitter's great. You have very sort of good. Sometimes you're just sort of pithy and concise, and sometimes you're going a bit more detail. Sort of running some of the problems you deal with, as you sort of mentioned. But it is interesting now that sort of you have become, you're almost sort of answering for the Web3 industry, and you're sort of, I noticed today you're saying, calm down everyone, Web3 gaming's not dead, because lots of other people seem to be sort of having all these problems with their tokens and all this sort of, so that's sort of another, it's not only just the game as an entity, it's sort of you as the sort of most visual sort of a face on that game as well. It sort of must be quite an interesting sort of situation to be in.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just shouting into the void for 2 years. I had the same kind of content before this. It's cool to know that I can maybe help make the industry better as well, because we have a lot of lessons that we've learned from actually having a game out, and there are lessons that you can only learn when you have a game out. That was partly why I wanted to work with Sky Mavis and the Axie Infinity team so badly, because once I started building a Web3 game and we had a live Web3 game, I realized, wow, there are so many things here that you just need the experience to understand what the problems even are. I just want to kind of do my part and help other people in the space make the space better. Because if the space grows, that's also good for us. It's easy for me to hire. It's easier to onboard new users if there's more reputation and a better view of the space with everybody. So we need better games to come out. I'm dying for them as well.
Yeah. But it is sort of, in some ways it's sort of interesting that as we've sort of discussed, you've grown quite a lot, and so you've seen your growth in sort of almost like orders of magnitude, and everyone else has seen their growth in sort of 10%, 20%. I mean, it's sort of this slightly weird sort of scenario where, and some of those games I play, and they're not bad games. So why do you think it's? I mean, obviously when you get to number one, you sort of attract more sort of growth there because you're the top game. But why do you think you're getting that sort of totally different sort of scale of growth?
Yeah, part of what we look for are the 10x improvements. I think a lot of games people, they're used to looking at the 10% improvements, and that's a huge part of Web2 gaming. When you're dealing in a very competitive space, you need to hyper optimize, right? So you're looking for the things in your pipelines that can maybe improve a 5% funnel, because when you're talking Web2 gaming and you're dealing with the volume that they typically do, a 5% improvement in one moving users from one screen to another might be millions of dollars of revenue, right? And a lot of people in Web2 gaming, when they're a part of a huge organization, a machine, that was their job before, right? So they come into Web3 gaming in this non-competitive space, and they bring in that expertise, which is going to be important in 3 to 5 years, I think. As more Web3 games come out and they're competing for attention more and more, you're going to need to do that. But right now, we're in a pretty uncompetitive market, meaning that there's not a lot of games out here. So what we look for is basically the 10x improvements. My team is more focused on the 80-20. We want to get features out that are 80% polished. And then, when the space gets more competitive, we would probably have to be doing that 20% of polish. It does take a lot of time, but we'd rather focus on the things that are new and innovative to get attention and move quicker. Because to me, there's still so much value to be unlocked here in Web3. And some of those things getting our token out at the right time and being very ready for it too, that's one of those 80-20s, right? Because now we have a huge advantage when it comes to user acquisition. Our token's pretty powerful when it comes to doing the things we want for it with user acquisition. Because we were ready, that was one of the things that we were thinking about a long time ago. We got it out at the right time. And now as more and more entrants are coming to the space, you get less of that juice from it every single time, right? So there's other examples of features that we're working on there too. One of the next things that we're going to be working on is reward targeting. And at first I was debating, like, do we hire this crazy data science team here, or do we just kind of like cowboy it and build a like 80-20, like something that's like 80% as good as something in Web 2. But when we have like the Web 3 native methods with it, it's probably going to be extremely powerful. We'll get it out quicker. We don't need to spend as many resources on it. So that's kind of the approach as well. Just build stuff quick, build new things, and try to iterate on them as quick as possible.
Yeah, I like the way you call this a non-competitive space, which is sort of, definitely in some ways it is, but equally in terms of the amount of titles out there, it's, there's a thousand games using blockchain. I mean, it's definitely not competitive in terms of in that sort of UA type. There's lots of lots of people doing lots of.
Yeah, I think it's like a good comparison to bring it to like early App Store days, right? When you launch the game on the App Store, you had a pretty good chance of doing well with it because there was new distribution there, and you didn't need to be so sophisticated when you did App Store launches or game launches back then. And as the space matured over like 5 to 10 years, that's when you had to start bringing in all these data science people that were basically optimizing every single little piece of how a user comes into the game and all of that. But the first games on the App Store and the first games in there, there wasn't as much competition when it comes to ad spend, all of this. So they were able to be quite profitable without, all the nuance that you need in like 5 to 10 years when more and more entrants come into the space.
And something that is as well sort of interesting, I think, where you sort of mentioned the value of your token, which clearly lots of, I guess one of the big trends this the last quarter has been lots of people launching tokens. I mean, whether they have games or not, it's probably another podcast. But you have your token out there. But you're sort of being, if you read the white paper, which probably most people don't, you're in there, you're quite sort of definite that this is, do not buy this token in the hope it's going to go up. This is not a speculative token or in that sort of sense. Well, I mean, every blockchain token is to some degree, but you're very much like this token is for people who want to play the game and it's useful in the game. And so you're sort of, it's sort of interesting that you seem to have, you've had this massive growth, but it's not through people coming in and hoping I guess there's a play to earn sort of element, but the token is there, but it's, I guess, the best example we've seen so far of a sort of asset in a game that has value attached to it, but most of that value is being held within the game. And, in fact, the price has gone down, which is, I mean, that's just market forces since you launched it. But it seems to be quite interesting because most other tokens either like 10x and then come down again or just immediately come down. But you actually have utility around it and it's not had a speculative sort of jump, which is, I think, is quite positive. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. So as we were like helping the foundation design the token, like get it out into the world and figure all of this stuff out, right? We have a very different view on this team of how tokens work, I think, than maybe other teams. Where if you notice, like we've been very intentional about not designing a Ponzi-nomics scheme, and really how we view tokens is more like free-to-play gaming. I don't think it's too different in the long run, and I think you could pull off a lot of stuff that we're doing with Web3 gaming with fiat currency in the long run if the team wanted to do that. The interesting stuff to me is more viewing the token as a user acquisition tool. And then the innovation that we're actually doing is what I like to call direct-to-consumer rewards. Tokenomics should not be so complicated. If you remember the space like 2 years ago, you would see, I couldn't understand tokenomics very well. I have an economics degree. I love tokenomics. I was studying them. I would look at people's white papers. I couldn't make sense of it. And then like you expect the average gamer that's playing your game to understand that, and they need to understand it to play the game. It was a little ridiculous, and a lot of those tokens aren't even around anymore is what I can say. But at the end of the day, what we think about is, there's two sides of it. One, we want to give tokens to people who are more likely to use the tokens in the game. It's not so easy. That's much easier said than done. And then two, we want to make sure that tokens used inside of the game too. And if we pull both of these things off, essentially we can create a system that looks a lot like a free-to-play game, except some people might end up coming out net positive, so play to earn. And that's the interesting part. If you can make a system that works like that, that's sustainable, where maybe 95% of your users are net zero or maybe even net positive when it comes to earnings, and then 5% of your users monetize like a free-to-play user base, potentially play there is viable. We're not that far from cracking it, I would say, actually. We would basically need to like 2x revenue from where it's at right now to be net positive spend inside of the ecosystem, which is not totally unreasonable. We basically have done nothing with monetization, optimization there, so that's when we're going to start to bring in some of those aspects. But the players don't even need to know any of this. Like they can just play the game, they might get some tokens, which is pretty cool. It's a great user experience the first time that you earn a token inside of a game.
Yeah.
And then we just need to make the game fun and give them reasons to use it. Some people might want to, some people might not, and that's totally okay.
And I guess the other interesting, I'm sure you're not the first game to do this, but sort of one of the key, most obvious use cases for using the Pixel tokens is you have this VIP membership, which is you can buy for, I think it's just 3 months or a year. There's different sort of options there. Obviously, discounted in different ways, but that's sort of, as you sort of discussed there, using the Pixels token as a reward mechanic, really to play the game at that sort of level where you might hope to become sort of net positive, you're going to have to at least upfront buy the VIP sort of membership in the first place. So there's a sort of an interesting sort of barrier in there where you are getting people to pony up ahead of time to see what happens, and that's worked quite well in terms of you clearly have. I can't remember what the numbers are at the moment. It was 200,000 I think was the last number I saw in terms of memberships. So there's people who are going, I'm happy to pay up front. It's not an enormous sum of money. I can't remember, it's like $10, $20, something like that a month. It works out, but they're happy to do that up front in order to enjoy. Mainly enjoy the game. I mean, you just can't take millions of dollars out of it. It's not that game.
Yeah, and that's close to driving. Like, it's close to $2.5 million in revenue a month on average right now, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So the main thing to talk about in terms of the timing of this podcast is you're launching sort of what you're calling Chapter 2 of the game next week. So obviously that's been a big focus. Can you sort of broadly sort of say what sort of things are you trying to do in Chapter 2 and what sort of, not necessarily problems are you fixing, but how is the game evolving in that, and how those features being?
Building a live game for 2 years, right? And we've learned so many lessons through like actually having a game out. What works inside of Web3 gaming, what doesn't, and we built it in like a very interesting way, right? It was kind of like a hodgepodge of all these different things that we tried out, and now we're in an interesting spot where we want to start building a better system for the future. We want to make the game make more sense. So this is a whole systems redesign. If you look at the game, it's going to look exactly the same on the surface level, but the way the players interact with the game on the day-to-day is going to be very different. The way that we distribute rewards, the progression, all of this kind of stuff is changing. So really, it's like a version 2 of the game. It's going to look, again, top level, very similar, but play it extremely differently. So there's a few goals that we're trying to achieve here. The first being we just need the game to make a little bit more sense to the typical gamer. So the systems coming in are going to be more MMO-like. If you've ever played the game like RuneScape, World of Warcraft, Ragnarok Online, MapleStory, there's like a much stronger sense of progression when it comes to resources that you're able to unlock. You have to get higher level tools, all this stuff that you're really used to seeing in social multiplayer games. We're finally incorporating this. We're changing some of the resource generation mechanics inside of the game too. We talk about cyber prevention, bot detection prevention a lot. My take is there's a bunch of different layers to that problem. One being the prevention, the capture side of things, two, the detection and banning. Three, preventing people from signing up again if you've already blocked them. That's fingerprinting. And then the fourth area that's really important is actually how the game is designed as well. So some of the game design that we're implementing is actually supposed to be more salvo resistant as well. Part of the end goal with this is we want to give out more rewards to more real users who have progressed further through the game. We want to create incentive structures for you to get further through the game and create better identification for that. So that's part of the reason behind some of these changes. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Guilds are really tied into this release as well too. So some of the social play as well. And then we've also focused a lot on the single player experience as well too. So these things together, we think are going to create a better base for the future of the game and just make a much better experience for users. It's funny because there's still some things we haven't quite fixed yet that are on the docket. If you come into the game still, there's not great tutorials. The onboarding experience isn't great. That wasn't the intention behind this. I wouldn't say we're going for mass market yet. There's still a few things we want to test here first before we start to really polish and fine tune some of these things. But this is basically the first step in creating a better base of the game and getting more and more content updates out quickly as well too, because this creates a better base to basically send out more content to the users, doing new industries, new types of items, new tiers, all of this. We're going to try to do this on at least a month of cadence moving forward.
Okay.
So content packs and all of this stuff as well.
Okay. And so guilds are a big thing in Web3, and I think people like YGG and I mean Mochaverse aren't really a guild from that point of view, but it seems like they've been quite helpful in terms of sort of your growth strategy and generally in Web3 games, if a Web3 game gets quite big, gets to a certain stage, then guilds who are just sort of knocking around anyway and need somewhere to push their users tend to get involved. But when you're saying guilds, if I've sort of seen this right, I mean obviously people like YGG can build and are very active in the game, but also it seems like you're now creating the ability for people to sort of create guilds sort of in the game for the first time. So it's not necessarily these external guilds, but also guilds within guilds are being created for the first time within Pixels. So there's sort of like two different uses of the term guild there, I suppose.
Yeah, no, there's Pixel native guilds now, and they're natively integrated into the game. And they're actually going to be a really big part of the gameplay inside of Chapter 2 as well. Essentially, one of the big changes to the systems of the game is resource generation is now single use. So if I can paint a picture, basically if somebody's farming on a plot of soil on the NFT lands, then only one person at a time can use it. So guilds are kind of going to be the like guardians of the resource generation. Like most guilds have ownership over land inside of the game, and it's going to kind of be up to them on how they want to self-organize in their lands. So if players want to gather resources that are land only, they might have to join a guild or get permission from a guild to come onto the land and harvest some of the resources. So it adds a new social element of gameplay, a lot of cooperation as well. We'll see how it goes. I'm pretty optimistic. We've been talking to the guild leaders and the players who are involved in the guilds quite often. They're very excited about it. There's still some new tools that we probably need to go and build out for them, but that's going to be part of the experimentation as well.
Okay. But it's interesting that you're saying, as well as these sort of high-level sort of social aspects, and I guess Pixels is sort of we generally refer to it as a sort of social RPG. That this sort of single-player thing is a sort of new features you're bringing in as well. So I guess you sort of want to have that experience where someone just rocking up to Pixels, not knowing much about it, can get deep enough into the game and then sort of transfer into a guild. You can't just sort of have people rocking in and then going, what am I doing? They're never going to join a guild unless they're already part of a guild, I suppose. Yeah,
exactly. So this is the base of essentially building like a much more friendly new user experience. There's still more that we're going to have to do when it comes to I've been playing games like Monopoly Go a ton, and it's insane what they do when it comes to like the retention mechanics and like the dopamine that they throw at you. We don't really have any of that right now. I don't think we necessarily need it. I think if you're motivated enough, you figure it out and your friends onboard you. There's something fun about that in the early stages of this. It's like you found a secret and you have to like put in the work to get access to it. But as we want to move to more of a mass market appeal, we're gonna have to get dialed in on that. So when we start to move into like more of a focus on US markets and APAC markets, that's when we'll start to bring in some of these more, better onboarding flows in this area. But yeah, we're starting the base of the progression now, basically. We just don't want to hold it off for a year before we make everything perfect and then realize the thing that's perfect doesn't work.
Yeah. And would you say at the moment that most of your audience sort of knows a bit about blockchain or sort of coming through blockchain sort of guilds or like that? I mean, are you at the stage where you're sort of at that tipping point of just people just going, I heard this game was called Pixels and I tried it out sort of thing?
I would say a lot of our users are like somewhat familiar, or they have like a friend or a family member that is but then these users are a lot more casual with it. Like Pixels is a lot of their only Web3 interaction, or they might mint an NFT specifically for Pixels to use as a skin, and that's basically all they do on chain. These aren't really degen users. They're really wholesome. Like if you look at some of the content that we post on X or Twitter, you'll see like, they're really sweet, really, really wholesome users.
Yeah. But I guess it's sort of interesting over the period of time where you guys have grown to whatever million MAUs, whatever, however we're measuring them. A lot of the sort of crypto crowd have just gone into really heavy degen. I mean, there's a cycle of really heavy degen games now where it's sort of fully on chain and on blast, and that sort of stuff's fine. But it seems like there's been a sort of bifurcation of an audience that at one point was sort of, we can play these nice farming games and then we can also do these degen things. It seems to have bizarrely split, which is maybe not a bad thing. I suppose which audience you're going for now, but it does seem a little bit
I think there's a place for that kind of stuff. But I think that was one area that was really neglected for a long time too, like casual crypto experiences that like, your mom would play. That's like, there's not many games even right now in the market. I'm really surprised by the fit that we're like one of the only ones right now.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's a comparison you would like, but it is in the sort of to some degree very much like a sort of FarmVille type experience. It is that sort of farming game where it's obviously deeper than that because you're more like an MMORPG. That's really, obviously that's sort of your background in terms of where you play. But for people just playing the game, you start out, you're planting berries and waiting for them to grow and harvesting them and then go and do things with them. It is quite a
no, great comparison. I would say like the spec experience that we're releasing is intended to be a bit more like that experience as well. FarmVille is a great example. I mean, you can't knock their success. It's amazing what they were able to do. Like I'm obsessed with Zynga and the early days of Zynga. It's a huge inspiration for what we're doing here.
Cool. And with that, doing the typical sort of journalism thing of asking you in detail about what's happening sort of next week and now saying sort of finish up, how do you see the rest of the year happening? Is it just now really by the end of the year you sort of want to hit this sort of monthly cadence of sort of content going out and just maturing what you're doing behind the scenes as a developer, and then just sort of letting it grow? Or do you still think from here you're going that sort of 10x growth sort of thing is something you still feel is the thing to be doing?
Yeah, so there's two things that we're focusing on right now. It's one, just like growth of the game, making sure the game is better and getting more fun, getting more content out, making sure the players are happy. And then there's like the other experiments that we're doing that are like, okay, what are those other like 10x improvements that we can do? So a lot of the data science stuff that we're doing, I'm very optimistic about and what effect it's going to have on the ecosystem. And then what effect it might have on us scaling the ecosystem also. Like, for example, if we really figure out some of the user acquisition technology that we're building out, there's a really interesting use case for us to basically bring on or acquire other games or build our own games. We're already starting building out like other titles right now with Pixel's IP. But if we can start to prove out this user acquisition technology, then it's a huge competitive advantage for us. Essentially, we might have tech that can scale rapidly, wildly, just like this game, and do it like 4 or 5 other games at the same time.
Okay. And I guess the sweet spot that you're in is, unlike a lot of blockchain games, you're not requiring lots of people to be entering the space and be educated, because you're sort of on that, you are in some ways a sort of quite on-chain game if you get to that level, but you don't have to be. So you sort of, you're not waiting for sort of market forces necessarily. You just go, there's a billion gamers out there, we just sort of have to go and find them in a way. Yeah,
I'm so optimistic and like weirdly confident of just like getting the incentives right and the growth will come. It's just what we've seen so far, basically, and it makes sense. It's like if there's incentives there, like they should get filled. The word of mouth, all this kind of stuff, and there's opportunity for us to juice this up too. Like we've done nothing with incentivized referrals or incentivized content. We'll start doing that when we're really ready to push the growth levers. So there's still some stuff that we're holding back on too.
Cool, good, lovely. Well, we'll leave it there because I know you've got other things to be doing. So thanks very much to Luke for his time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thanks to you guys for watching, listening, however you are consuming the podcast. Every week we're pushing out new episodes of what's going on. Unfortunately, not every, or most projects don't have a Luke's sort of growth curve to talk about, but there's loads of interesting stuff going on nevertheless. So I hope you are subscribed and hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. See you next time. Bye-bye.